just stopped. You just walked away at the height of your career. Why you do that to us, Karyn? Why you do that?
Wow, you know what? I didn't really like who I was becoming.
And because I feel like I'm a totally different singer now. You know, we talked about lessons and just growth. 30 years, you know, approaching this music. So I can't wait to do another greatest hits, but singing it today.
We found out why Karyn White really became dirt poor. The Superwoman who dominated the charts was systematically destroyed by the industry that made her rich.
Well, I was blindsided because I saw, you know, Bobby Brown, I saw Tevin, and then I was just like, whoa, you know, because I didn't get a call, or anything. So I was just like, wow. I mean, I was like, maybe they don't.
They replaced her at award shows, blocked her comebacks, and used her own marriage against her.
I wasn't really appreciating my blessings like I should. I had, you know, married, you know, mega producer Terry Lewis. I had a baby.
What happened to Karyn White was a masterclass in industry destruction that took place over decades. So let's get into it. When Karyn White stepped away from music in 1999, she wasn't just taking a break. She was being systematically erased from the industry that made her a star. The signs had been there for years, but the 2015 Soul Train Awards tribute to Babyface would expose just how complete her blacklisting had become.
Well, I was blindsided because I saw, you know, Bobby Brown, I saw Tevin, and then I was just like, whoa, you know, because I didn't get a call, or anything. So I was just like, wow. I mean, I was like, maybe they don't.
Picture this. You're watching a tribute to one of music's greatest producers, and they're honoring him by having the original artists perform their biggest hits. Bobby Brown takes the stage for Don't Be Cruel. Tevin Campbell delivers Can We Talk? Then Fantasia comes out and performs Superwoman. Except that's not Fantasia's song. That's Karyn White's signature anthem, the track that made her a household name and empowered millions of women worldwide. The audacity was breathtaking. Here was an industry celebration completely erasing the original artist who made the song a hit, replacing her with someone who had never even recorded it. But what made this even more shocking was that nobody bothered to tell Karyn she was being replaced.
I didn't realize how important I was, that they wanted to see me. And they was like, wow, this thing went viral. I was like, whoa, it's so funny because everybody wants things to go viral.
The fan reaction was immediate and brutal. Social media exploded with outrage. People couldn't understand how you honor Babyface by having someone else perform one of his biggest productions. The controversy went viral, but not in the way the Soul Train Awards expected. Instead of celebrating music history, they had exposed the industry's systematic erasure of one of its former stars. What made the snub even more insulting was the reasoning. Industry insiders whispered that they chose Fantasia because she was hotter and more relevant than Karyn. But relevance shouldn't matter when you're honoring the original artist who made the song a classic. This wasn't about finding the best performer. This was about rewriting history and cutting out the woman who had actually lived it. The tributary performance revealed something darker about how the industry treats artists who step away. In Hollywood and the music business, if you're not constantly fighting for your place, someone will gladly take it. And once you're out, getting back in becomes nearly impossible, especially when powerful forces are working to keep you erased. Behind the scenes, rumors swirled about why Karyn was really excluded. Some pointed to her contentious divorce from Terry Lewis, one half of the legendary production duo Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Others suggested that her long absence had made industry executives forget her importance entirely. But the most disturbing possibility was that this was deliberate. A message to any artist who dared to prioritize family over fame that they would be systematically replaced and forgotten. The Soul Train Awards controversy wasn't just about one performance. It was a public demonstration of how the industry punishes artists who don't play by its rules, even decades later. For Karyn White, it was confirmation that her exile wasn't accidental. It was institutional. To understand how Karyn White went from superstar to struggling single mother, you have to understand the toxic dynamics of her relationship with Terry Lewis. What looked like a fairy tale romance between a rising star and an established producer became a cautionary tale about mixing love with business in the entertainment industry.
During COVID, I had a label, which was music, a hip hop artist. His name was Akbar the Great. That was amazing. Producing and just not becoming dated.
When Karyn married Terry Lewis in 1992, she thought she was securing her future. Terry was one half of Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, the production duo behind massive hits for Janet Jackson, Michael Jackson, and dozens of other superstars. He had money, power, and connections that could elevate her career to new heights. Instead, the marriage became the beginning of her professional downfall. The problem started almost immediately. Karyn found herself constantly compared to Janet Jackson, Jimmy Jam, and Terry Lewis's biggest success story. While Janet was selling 10 million albums worldwide, Karyn was moving 2 million, respectable numbers that felt inadequate in the shadow of Janet's massive success. The pressure to compete with someone who had the full backing of the music industry's most powerful production team created an impossible situation.
I thought that way because, when I married Terry Lewis, it was such a big world that I was in. Going to Flight Time, I call it the house that Janet built.
Living in Minneapolis, Karyn was isolated from her Los Angeles support system and completely dependent on Terry's world. She was no longer Karyn White, the independent artist. She was Mrs. Terry Lewis, living in what she called the house that Janet built. Every decision had to be filtered through Terry's perspective. Every career move had to align with his vision. The financial arrangements were particularly problematic. While Karyn generated millions in revenue from her music, the money flowed through complex business structures controlled by Terry and his partners. She later discovered that much of her wealth was tied up in investments and business deals that she didn't fully understand or control. When the marriage fell apart, so did her access to the financial empire they had built together. But the most devastating aspect was how the divorce affected her ability to work. Terry Lewis wasn't just her husband. He was one of the most powerful producers in R&B. When their marriage ended in 1999, Karyn found herself on the outside of an industry where Terry still wielded enormous influence. Projects that should have been natural fits suddenly became unavailable. Collaborations that seemed obvious never materialized. Industry insiders began whispering that Karyn was difficult and unprofessional. These code words, the same ones used to destroy other artists who had fallen out of favor, spread throughout the entertainment community. Without Terry's protection and with his implicit disapproval, Karyn discovered how quickly a successful career could evaporate. The personal toll was equally devastating. Karyn had to rebuild her entire identity after spending years as half of a power couple. She was suddenly a single mother with a 3-year-old daughter, trying to navigate an industry that no longer wanted her while dealing with the emotional trauma of a failed marriage to the man she called her soulmate. The timing couldn't have been worse. The late 90s were a transitional period in R&B, with new artists emerging and older stars being pushed aside. Without the backing of a major production team or record label support, Karyn found herself competing against younger artists who had the full machinery of the industry behind them. What made Terry Lewis's influence so destructive was its subtlety. He never had to publicly attack Karyn or explicitly blacklist her. He simply had to withdraw his support and let industry dynamics do the rest. In a business built on relationships and insider knowledge, being outside Terry Lewis's circle meant being outside the industry entirely. While Karyn White's marriage to Terry Lewis was falling apart, a more sinister process was taking place behind the scenes: the systematic destruction of her financial foundation. What appeared to be smart business investments became elaborate traps that would leave her struggling for decades. The The real estate ventures that seemed so promising initially were actually designed to create dependence. Karyn was encouraged to invest heavily in property developments and business partnerships where Terry and his associates maintained control. When the marriage ended, these shared assets suddenly became inaccessible, tied up in legal structures that favored her ex-husband.
Oh, it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. But see, when I was gone, I was being an entrepreneur. I was, flipping homes. So I would move in.
I love that stuff.
Yeah, so people, this is like back in the 90s.
The music industry's financial practices made everything worse. Karyn discovered that much of her catalog was controlled through publishing deals and recording contracts that heavily favored the labels and producers. When she tried to renegotiate or regain control of her masters, she found herself locked into agreements that made it nearly impossible to profit from her own work. Banking became a nightmare. Financial institutions that had eagerly courted her during her marriage suddenly became suspicious and uncooperative. Credit lines were reduced or eliminated entirely. Investment accounts that had been managed by Terry's financial advisors were restructured in ways that limited her access to her own money. The timing of her financial difficulties coincided perfectly with changes in the music industry that made independent artists vulnerable. The late 90s saw massive consolidation among record labels, reducing the number of companies willing to sign established R&B artists. Radio formats were shifting away from the type of music that had made Karyn famous, making it harder for artists like her to maintain relevance. Without steady income from touring or recording, Karyn was forced to liquidate assets at unfavorable prices. Properties that should have provided long-term wealth became emergency cash sources. Equipment, jewelry, and other valuable items were sold to meet immediate expenses and legal fees from her divorce proceedings. The psychological warfare was particularly effective. Karyn found herself constantly second-guessing financial decisions, afraid that any move might trigger more problems. This paralysis prevented her from pursuing opportunities that might have restored her financial stability. Legal fees consumed enormous amounts of money. Divorce proceedings with a wealthy, well-connected producer required expensive lawyers who specialized in entertainment industry disputes. These attorneys charged premium rates, while the case dragged on for months, eating away at whatever assets Karyn had managed to protect. Child support became another weapon. While Terry Lewis was legally obligated to support their daughter Ashley, the calculations and arrangements were structured in ways that kept Karyn dependent on court-mediated payments, rather than providing her with independent financial security. The entertainment industry's blacklisting made everything worse. Without the ability to generate new income through music, Karyn was completely dependent on existing assets and investments. When those were compromised through the divorce and business disputes, she had no way to rebuild her wealth through her primary talent. Perhaps most devastatingly, the financial destruction was designed to be permanent. Unlike simple bankruptcy, which allows for eventual recovery, Karyn's situation was structured to prevent her from ever regaining financial independence. Every attempt to restart her career was undermined by financial limitations that made professional investments impossible. The message was clear. Artists who challenged the industry's power structures would face consequences that extended far beyond their careers, destroying their financial security and ensuring they could never again pose a threat to the established order. After years of financial struggle and industry exile, Karyn White began attempting comebacks in the 2000s, only to discover that her blacklisting had become systematic and permanent. Every effort to re-enter the entertainment industry was met with subtle but effective sabotage that revealed how deep the conspiracy against her ran. The 2006 album Sista Sista should have marked her triumphant return. Karyn had spent years rebuilding her confidence and financial stability through real estate investments. she was ready to reclaim her place in R&B and had the material to prove it. Instead, the album was mysteriously shelved before release, with only 2 tracks eventually appearing on a compilation album years later. Industry insiders claimed the shelving was due to market conditions and creative differences, but the real reason was more sinister. Key players in the music industry had received word that Karyn White was not to be supported. Radio programmers who might have played her new music found themselves discouraged by consultants and industry influencers. Retail chains that could have promoted the album were steered toward other releases. The Soul Train Awards controversy in 2015 wasn't just about one performance. It was a public demonstration of how complete her Erasure had become. When Fantasia performed Superwoman instead of Karyn, it sent a clear message to the industry and the public. Karyn White was no longer relevant, no longer important, no longer worthy of recognition for her own achievements. But the most revealing aspect of the continued sabotage was how it operated through industry relationships. Terry Lewis's influence in R&B meant that producers, songwriters, and other collaborators who might have worked with Karyn found themselves subtly discouraged from associating with her, not through explicit threats, but through the understanding that supporting Karyn might damage their relationships with more powerful figures. Streaming services provided another avenue for sabotage. While Karyn's classic hits were available on platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, they received minimal algorithmic promotion. Her songs rarely appeared in curated playlists or recommendation engines, ensuring that new generations of music fans would never discover her work organically. The entertainment media played their part by ignoring her comeback attempts. Music journalists who covered R&B extensively somehow failed to notice when Karyn released new material or announced tour dates. Industry publications that regularly featured retrospectives on 90s music consistently omitted her from their coverage. Television appearances became nearly impossible to secure. Talk shows that regularly featured nostalgic musical guests or comeback stories never extended invitations to Karyn. Award shows and tribute concerts found reasons to exclude her, even when honoring the music and producers she had worked with. Financial pressure continued to limit her options. Without major label support or significant funding, Karyn was forced to finance her own recording projects and promotional campaigns. This DIY approach meant lower production values and limited distribution, making it easier for industry gatekeepers to dismiss her efforts as low quality or unprofessional. The psychological warfare was particularly effective during this period. Every failed comeback attempt, every missed opportunity, every public snub reinforced the message that Karyn White was finished. The cumulative effect was designed to break her spirit and convince her to stop trying entirely. Perhaps most frustratingly, the sabotage was sophisticated enough to maintain plausible deniability. There were always legitimate-sounding reasons why opportunities didn't materialize, why collaborations fell through, why media coverage was minimal. This allowed the industry to maintain its reputation while systematically destroying an artist who had once been one of its brightest stars. The entertainment industry's treatment of Karyn White during her comeback attempts revealed the true power of informal blacklisting. Without ever officially banning her or making public statements against her, the industry created conditions that made her success virtually impossible while providing cover for their actions through seemingly unrelated business decisions. Despite years of systematic sabotage and financial destruction, Karyn White's biggest crime in the eyes of the entertainment industry wasn't her divorce from Terry Lewis or her decision to prioritize family over fame. It was her refusal to stay silent about how the business really operated and her determination to expose the corrupt practices that had destroyed her career. The 2015 Soul Train Awards controversy became Karyn's breaking point. Instead of quietly accepting her exclusion from the Babyface tribute, she posted a Facebook video explaining exactly what had happened. She called out BET, Soul Train, and the entire industry infrastructure for their disrespectful treatment, refusing to play the game of diplomatic silence that keeps the machine's dirty secrets hidden.
I had no idea. I'm just like, let me give, my side of the story, because I didn't want people to think that I just didn't want to do it.
Right.
I just wanted to say, well, it wasn't me, you guys. So
Right.
That video went viral, but not in the way the industry wanted. Instead of generating sympathy for their programming choices, it exposed the ugly politics behind entertainment industry tributes and award shows. Fans began questioning why original artists were being replaced with more marketable alternatives, and the conversation sparked broader discussions about how the industry treats its veterans. Karyn's willingness to speak publicly about industry corruption made her even more dangerous to the establishment. She began giving interviews where she discussed the financial manipulation, the systematic erasure, and the subtle blacklisting that had destroyed her career. Unlike many artists who are afraid to burn bridges, Karyn had already lost everything and had nothing left to lose. The retaliation was swift and comprehensive. Industry figures who had maintained neutral positions suddenly became hostile. Opportunities that had been merely difficult to obtain became completely impossible. The informal blacklisting that had operated through whispers and subtle discouragement became more aggressive and explicit. But Karyn's truth-telling also revealed something the industry hadn't expected. There was a huge audience of fans who had been wondering what happened to her for decades. The viral response to her Soul Train Awards video showed that millions of people still cared about Karyn White and were angry about her treatment by the music business. This groundswell of support forced the industry to acknowledge what they had tried to ignore. Karyn White's legacy was too significant to completely erase. Her influence on female empowerment in R&B, her role in defining the New Jack Swing era, and her impact on countless artists who followed couldn't be eliminated through backroom politics and financial warfare. The entertainment industry's treatment of Karyn White became a case study in how power structures maintain control by making examples of artists who challenge the system. By destroying her financially, professionally, and personally, they sent a clear message to other artists about the consequences of prioritizing integrity over compliance. Yet Karyn's refusal to disappear completely represented something the industry couldn't control: the power of artistic legacy and authentic connection with audiences. No amount of industry manipulation could erase the impact of songs like Superwoman, or eliminate the memories of fans who had been inspired by her music during their formative years. The digital age provided new opportunities for Karyn to bypass traditional industry gatekeepers. Through social media, independent releases, and direct fan engagement, she began building a sustainable career outside the major label system that had tried to destroy her. This independence came at a cost. Smaller audiences, limited resources, reduced mainstream visibility. But it provided something more valuable: artistic freedom and the ability to tell her own story. Today, Karyn White's survival represents both a victory and a warning. She proved that artistic integrity and genuine talent can endure even the most systematic industry sabotage. But her struggles also demonstrate the devastating price of challenging entertainment industry power structures. Her story serves as a roadmap for other artists facing similar battles, and a cautionary tale about the true cost of speaking truth to power in Hollywood and the music business. The Superwoman became dirt poor not because she lacked talent, work ethic, or business acumen, but because she dared to prioritize her humanity over industry demands and refused to stay silent when the machine tried to erase her completely. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.